Yo, welcome back to the Reloved Guitars workshop. This is Sam and welcoming you to 2016, and not only do I welcome you, but so does Mr. Morris, who's just been outside and got very wet. He's hoping that you have a successful, happy and prosperous and all the rest of it new year, but most of all healthy, because that's the bit that really matters. People always say if you haven't got your health you haven't got anything, but it's absolutely true. And my best wishes go out to anybody suffering from major health problems at this time in their lives, and just I think anyone who's really suffering, I think when they get to that place all they wish for is that other people truly acknowledge and make the most of their good health. Often we don't. We get complacent, don't we, Morris? It's only a short time we're here. Even shorter when you're a cat, but hey. Anyway, so it's 2016. It's the 4th of January, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to upload this for a few more days yet because we still have a problem with the internet. I tried to upload a video last night and it started off telling me it had about 400 minutes when I set it going about 2 AM. And then I came down, checked it again this morning at about 9 and it was 18% done. So in 6 hours it had managed 18%, but the minute count had gone up to something like 1500 minutes, 1600 minutes, so it's just never going to get there. And with our fabulous system, Sky, with our Sky router, it can't simultaneously upload us at the same time as downloading. So if somebody like me who needs to upload files, you're screwed basically. So I have to go down to a business centre in Plymouth to do it, and I won't be able to get there for a few more days. So by the time I've done this video, I'll have 2.5 videos to upload, which I kind of have to make it worth spending a day down there. So it'll be in the next week or so. So apologies, you'll see this later, if you get what I mean. It won't be the 4th of January. Hey, mind out, I don't want my pens all over the floor. Pauline's pens, come on. Now you have to go because I've got to start this SG. So the reason we're here today is we have another black SG. And this is a Wilkinson model. Picked this up yesterday from someone in Plymouth. And it's overall in pretty good condition. It's been well played, as all these SGs have, which I think is a really good sign that they've been kind of really loved and played to death by their owners. As I say, this is a Wilkinson equipped one, although it doesn't have the sort of Wilkinson writing on the top, on the back, but it's got Wilkinson humbuckers as well as the Wilkinson tuners. So it's a later-ish model one, yeah, it's all there. It's a bit filthy. Frets are, I'd say, halfway down their lives, so they're not the newest frets I've ever seen, but they will. Having played it, it's quite a low action anyway. Having played it, it won't take much to bring that back up to nice condition. So what I like about these guitars is they're just all round. They're really, really nice quality to work with. I mean, they're dead simple. You've got a slab of mahogany for the body with another pardon me, another slag of mahogany for the neck, and is that Freudian slip? No, I wouldn't do that because these are really nice necks. So it's yeah, they're just 2 pieces of mahogany. That's safer, isn't it? And some rosewood for the fingerboard, but that's a glued neck, and the only thing you have to watch out for there is, has it been hit so hard that it split the join? I don't think you tend to split the glue join, but quite often the enamel, not the enamel, the lacquer around here can quite easily split if you give it a bash, bottom or top, because there's nowhere for the energy to shed, and it tends to kind of shed it out through the joint. Got really fairly nice quality Wilkinson tuners, Wilkinson Deluxe vintage tuners on there. What's nice about these is they've got the smaller bore, smaller diameter holes, so you can replace them without having to drill out. Not that you need to on this, they're good quality, but if you wanted to go for some other tuners, you could fit similar vintage style tulip kind of knobbed tuners on there, or you drill out and put different, different aftermarket tuners on. Two Wilkinson humbuckers, usually pretty hot and nice output. 4 of these knobs. They're not the best things. They're not exactly speed dial knobs, but they're okay. 3-way switch, of course. A pick guard that's just really cosmetic, and a little neck join kind of guard there that just sits and hides the join. Standard tunematic bridge, standard stop bar, and in the back just a basic kind of SG stroke LP wiring setup. And yeah, overall really good. This looks to me like it's had a replacement nut put in. The seal is broken, if you like. You can often tell when there's a discontinuity between the lacquer on the edge of the fingerboard and the nut. So this appears to have been filed and put in place. Looking at the height over the first fret, it probably needs a minor adjustment, but nothing major. Yeah, so it's kind of all there. It has a few little scratches on the back, which are not major. They don't get anywhere into affecting the play. Hardly anything on the headstock. It's usually chipped up here somewhere, but this one's pretty clean, so it will clean up very well. And there is one tiny thing I noticed. There's a sort of run of lacquer run down here. It's just, you can just feel it as a sort of see it and feel it. It's just a kind of blob really on the lacquer, but again, absolutely minor. Nothing to affect it. And on this one there is a tiny chip on the lacquer underneath, just at the edge of this fingerboard here, pick guard here, which I'll take it off when I clean it all up and see what the extent of it is. But it has a couple of minor surface imperfections, but other than that, it's all there. It's good solid SG, and apart from all that good stuff that it's got going for it, the thing I like most about these is the flexibility of the neck. Because the whole of the neck is out of the body, they respond really well to truss rod adjustment, and you can get them really not straight exactly. They're very even, and they adjust equally all the way along, which Les Paul necks never seem to do in my experience. So what it means is you can get really low fast playing actions very easily out of an SG in my experience, which is why I like them. They don't seem to present any major problems. So hence I've had about 6 or 7 of these through the workshop now. So there we go. So I'm just going to take a break to finish my coffee, and then I will kick back into action. Meanwhile, I'm also doing some kind of extra work on this my oak caster from a while back. It's finished, but actually I didn't like the way the headstock was looking, so I've taken the vintage lacquer off the headstock and re-lacquered in polyurethane this time. I'm going to see if that gives me a better result. Water-based lacquer as opposed to the sort of cheap and cheerful, not cheap, the quick and cheerful nitrocellulose that sometimes I use when I'm doing a front of a headstock finish. But I wasn't too happy with that, and I've had some good results doing some practice runs with waterborne. Anyway, so I'm going to leave that. I'm going to be constantly switching over to just put a layer on that as we go throughout this session, but I'm hoping to get this done in the next 3 hours. It should be straight through, and the plan of action on this is to, much as I'm desperate to get in and take everything off and clean it all up, there's a real temptation to do that. Obviously I won't. What I'll do is I'll get the action and everything set up the way I want it, even with the mucky old strings in and all the grime, and then I'm going to just take care of the frets first. So I'll set the playing action to its ideal for me, then I'll do the fret leveling, then I'll take the strings off and take everything off, give it all a clean up, and then bring it all back together again. Yeah, nice smell, Morris. Can you detect thousands of years of playing and teenage angst that's gone into that? No? No? Okay, that was a no. Right, so that's what I'm going to do. So I'll see you back in a minute, and Morris miraculously won't be on the work surface at that point, will you, my friend? All I have to do to make him run away is get the hoover out. Henry's coming, Morris. Henry's coming for you. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Right, I tried to describe to somebody the other day the sound of a guitar when its strings are knackered. And in fact, I was trying to describe to somebody the sound that the bass strings, my brother's Taylor GS Mini made when it came to me. Brand new guitar, brand new strings, and the bass strings on that guitar sounded like this. That is the sound of completely dead strings. No dynamics at all. Now we know with this, once we clean it up and put new strings on, it's going to sound great. But that's how his guitar sounded, and ended up getting it replaced because there was nothing I could do. It wasn't even the strings on that guitar; it was acoustically dead in the bass regions. And because, of course, on acoustic guitar it's all about the wood, for some reason it wouldn't. So anyway, that's the sound of very dead strings. It's a low sort of thunk. Boom, 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 boom. That sounds a bit better, but anyway, these strings are going to serve a purpose for the time being, and what they're going to do is I'm going to set the three things that matter to me on this guitar. Is I'm going to set the playing height at the end there to the target playing action that I'm looking for, and it's currently coming in at 2 point something. So I'm going to immediately want to dial this back in to about 1.5. to give myself a really nice low target. Although I want it, yeah, that's about right. So the first thing to do is step one. Once I've dialed it in to the height I want, here's where I'm going to discover whether I've got problems on the frets. So yep. So there's a lot of little buzzes, and in particular a bit of a dead spot there. Not too bad, but yeah, a little bit dead there. So that's the height I want. So as I've said a few times in these videos, most of the time when you don't do setup work on a guitar, you basically play the guitar, and the way you play it is, or the action you have set, is dictated by the condition of the neck or the evenness of the frets. Actually, the general condition of the neck, but in particular the evenness of the frets or otherwise. And yet, because most people, when they get the guitar, all they've got to work with is the up and down of this bridge here. They'll just work that bridge up and down, or individual saddles on a Stratocaster, until the guitar plays as good as it can, given that the frets underneath may be doing who knows what. The great thing about doing a setup on it is that we're imposing what we want on the guitar and making the neck conform to that. So I start out with the point of view is I want an action of about 1.5 down here, really low. I want it as low as it can be, reasonably, so it's a nice fast rock and roll guitar. I want an action down here that's light and easy and with no intonation problems, which means I need a particular height over the first fret, which I'll check and set in a minute. And then I'll check the truss rod, and I can do that in this order. Do the truss rod and make sure there's some relief in the neck, which equates to about 0.2 of a millimetre over the 8th fret. People have lots of different figures for lots of different guitars. I tend to go by eye and feel, and I can tell you that it's very small amount. It's probably about 0.1 of a mil, but if we want to get numbery, we can always go and check it. So let's say I was going for a 0.2 and we're going over the 8th fret, let's say 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, sort of midpoint. Actually it's probably about 8 or 9, but so what I'm looking at is, probably need my better glasses on. is there fresh air under here? No, see, this is very, very low. It's hardly any, can't get it to play. Can't get it to ring. So that's more like 0.1. So one of the things I would do immediately is get that cover off. And give myself a little bit more neck relief than that, but not a huge amount. And to do that, we would adjust the truss rod in a counterclockwise direction, so that way. We don't need to do it much, but just give it a little bit more curvature or relief than it already has. But for me, I would have just looked at that, and I could have done it by holding. You don't even need the capo really, it's nice to have, but you can hold this end, hold that end, and you can just literally press down the middle, and you can see there's virtually nothing there. So you can do it by eye, and you'll do it by feel as well. And you know, over time you'll try different settings, and you'll set it up one way, and then you'll adjust the truss rod, and you'll feel how it improves or hinders the action a little bit. So I'm just taking a sort of quarter or maybe a sixth turn, and just let it catch up with us. Sometimes, again, all kinds of different views about how long it takes, and some people, you know, will talk about weeks of waiting for the truss rod, and some people will say seconds, and some people will say, depending on the temperature in the country you live in and the humidity and whatnot. And there's no one answer. You'll just get the feel for which guitars go quicker and which don't. In my experience, these don't take a hell of a long time to show up, the changes, but yeah, it's more already. And that looks to me like about nearly 0.2 now. So I'm going to stop there. Come on to my next part of the equation, which is on the nut slot. I want an action of about 0.3 over the first fret of a mil, 0.3 of a mil. So sorry Americans if you have to translate that over. I don't know what the immediate translation is. I'm just looking at the end of the fingerboard here. It's a bit corroded, so whoever's changed this nut out before, I think has probably just corroded off the edge of the fingerboard a bit. It has no effect on the playing of it, it's just a minor detail. When I got the strings off and I've cleaned the fingerboard up, I have the opportunity, I could put some, fill it with some rosewood dust and some glue if I wanted to, but it has no effect at all on anything, it's just cosmetic. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is on this, I'm just going to drop off the bottom 3 strings, or 2, and I'm just going to start working outwards on the heights. So that, because it rings, that's slightly over 0.3, so I'm just going to lay out my nut files. This is another kind of age-old thing I've probably gone on about loads of times in the past, but it's one of those things. People say, do I have to go out and buy a 60 quid set of Japanese nut files? And the answer is yes and no at the same time. It's one of those infuriating answers. The reason the answer is no is if you don't have any money to spare for these kinds of things, okay, it is entirely possible to... let's rewind. What am I trying to do in this? I'm trying to make the guitar play the best it can at this end, to make the guitar play accurately and have a beautiful light action, and to be a pleasure for a learner to play. Now I know that the person who's having this guitar is a learner, and even more so, I want this to be as light as a feather at this end, to play beautifully, clean notes all the way with level frets, polished up frets, everything, but I want it also to be as light as possible at this end, so that youngster can learn to play bar chords and Fs and difficult bar chords down this end without any effort at all. So that's why I care about the height over the first fret, and I care about it because if it's any more than 0.5, my experience shows that fretting the strings down here pushes them slightly sharp, which means, sounds like nothing much, but if the action over the first fret on this guitar was about 0.5 or 0.6, most people will tune their guitar up perfectly to a tuner, chromatic tuner. You fret these three strings to play a D, which is one of the first chords you ever learn, and what happens is these three strings, because of the height of 0.6 or so over the first fret, it forces these three strings sharp in order to fret them, and what you get is a handful of notes down here which are all in tune with each other, concert pitch if you like, and these three which are slightly sharp. And most people with a half musical ear will know the difference. Most people won't know what causes that, but they'll experience it as a messy sound, and most people will, just in my experience, will describe it as not being able to get the damn guitar in tune. And often they'll then move on and try and spend more money on another guitar and find it has a similar problem, or if they're lucky it doesn't by chance, but it's usually caused by the excess height. And excess height, we're talking tiny fractions of a millimeter, or fractions of a millimeter. So I want the action down here to be as low as possible. I want the neck relief to be correct to give the strings enough space to spin when they're vibrating at their normal kind of playing rate. And I want the action over the first fret to be as low and true in terms of intonation down here as possible. Hence this. Hence I'm so precise about this, and I get my 0.3 of a millimeter and I can put it under there, and lo and behold, I know I can cut these down a little bit to make it even more perfect. So the question was, what am I aiming for? Well, I'm aiming for the easiest playing, most perfectly intonated guitar possible. What's critical to that when we're talking about this end of it? Well, it's getting these strings to pass over this first fret at the right height, okay, about 0.3 in the case of the guitars that I set up, not 0.8 or 1 millimeter, which a lot of guitars come out of the shop as. So that if that's the target, right, almost who gives a damn how you get there? You see what I'm saying? It's like, yes, you could spend 60 quid and get a load of nice Japanese files, but I don't really care about how I get there, to be fair, as long as I don't make things worse. If you've got no money, you can buy a set of these things. This is not the right one, this is the square one, but if you get the triangular one, a set of these files costs about 6 quid on Amazon. Diamond coated jeweler's files, they're cheap as chips, right? You take this perfect I think it's kind of like an isosceles, is that isosceles triangle? Anyway, the one with the three same sides. This triangular file, which as a fraction of that whole kit costs about 70p or 60 pence, less than, about 50 cents or 60 cents or whatever. This file will give me that result for that tiny fraction. So 50 quid for all of those. What do those give me? Well, they give me a set of holes with different widths, respecting, broadly speaking, matching the thickness of the string gauge, right? Okay, that seems important, but how about we haven't got that money and we do it with this? Well, what do we get? Well, we get a V-shaped slot that we can take as low or as high as we want. So we only stop when we've got the height over the first fret, so that's cool. We don't need to measure the depth, we just keep going until we measure the right height. So that could do it. What's the problem? Well, I'll show you on the board just very quickly. If we did that, this is what purists would hate, but I'm just talking about if you don't have that much money. We're looking at here's my nut, right? We're looking at this kind of slot versus this kind of slot, right? Now let's say they're perfectly able, we do the same thing as each other to get them to the same depth. We only get there by measuring the height over the first fret. That's the only way we know. And all the differences between these two things that for a purist to argue about, right, this is exaggerated, you wouldn't necessarily put the string all the way down in here, but the difference is the string in a perfect slot will touch all the way around there, and the string sitting in the position you want it to in a V slot will touch there and there. Okay, so this is your 70 pence version and this is your 50 quid or 60 quid a set version, right? So the difference between those two, you still get to exactly the same height because you get there the same way by measuring the action over the first fret, so you stop when you've got the action you want. So what is the difference? Well, folks, the difference is the aesthetics of this gap. Oh, that looks really ugly and unprofessional. That's correct and professional. And in mechanical terms, it touches here and here, or it touches all the way around. And you could argue both ways on this. You could say, excuse me, you could say that this one causes more friction. It's got half of the string is touching. And what does friction cause? It causes sticking, pinging, you name it, right? So you have to add all kinds of things like graphite or lubrication or whatever, right? This one, less friction, but more pressure on particular spots. Who knows, right? I've tried both and they both work, right? So the question here is, do you want to spend 70p? Have you got 70p to spend? Do you want a better playing guitar? Do that. Right? If you've got more money and you're doing it for other people who may have sensibilities about it, buy those. But I just want to let you know that it isn't, when you see people arguing about which is which, people will argue for whichever, they tend to argue for whichever decision they made in the first place. Another angle of this way of thinking about it, sorry, this is going to take longer just because I'm going on about this, but another angle about this is, you'll notice now I have another set of these things here. Ta-da! These are set for a 0.9, or sorry, a 9 gauge, you know, 0.09 inch, or 0.09 inch, sorry. And this is for a 10 gauge set. And I'm putting 9 strings on, but I'm using 10s. Why? Well, think about it. When the guitar comes with its nut ready-made, but let's rewind. First of all, people will say to you, you can't possibly use the wrong gauge of nut slots. You've got nut files. You've got to buy a set for every gauge, haven't you? Which is why the manufacturers make a £60 set for every gauge. But then think about it logically. The guitar that you bought comes with a nut. The nut is already cut. Is it cut for just a set of 9s? Of course it's not. You'd imagine the first time you put a set of 10s in, you'd be sending the guitar back because everything was sticking at the nut and nothing would work. So of course they're not made for a specific gauge. They're made to cater for the most commonly used gauges. And so a shop bought guitar will probably have a nut that will take a 13 and a set based on a 13 gauge. So and equally it means you can put a 9 in there and it will play okay. So this idea that you have to have a different gauge for every a different set of files for every gauge is just madness. It's just, you know, trying to think who it serves. It serves the people who make these files more than anybody else. Particularly given you don't have a separate file for every gauge. You just make one. You just use this, and every string, the string sits in the groove. All that happens in a thinner string sits down further into the groove. It means you don't cut as far to get the same. But you're measuring it by. You're measuring all the time by the string's height over the first fret, so you never overcut it. So anyway, there's just some, not myths exactly, but it's one of those things that's too easy to get caught up into thinking you must do it a certain way. Coming back, if I were to cut these with V-shaped slots using the 70p file, right, I guarantee you I could make the perfect slots for this, get the exact action I want, and the youngster who's going to get this guitar later in the week would play it and it would feel absolutely superb. The only trouble he'd run into, I promise you, would be when somebody who lives on guitar forums and thinks they know what's right and wrong will meet him at a practice session someday and tell him that his guitar's a load of shite because somebody's, you know, some monkey's done the nut slots with the diamond file. But that's the only time he'll hit problems. But there we go. You have to be kind of a bit sensitive to both because, you know, perceptions are realities most of the time. And so, you know, for example, I don't want to not get business because I challenge too many people's perceptions of what's the correct way of doing it. But I just want, you know, I like to present those arguments so that, you know, we can all think about it and come to our own conclusions. And absolutely, if that's all I had, I'd crack on and do it with that. Like I said, I'd happily do that on my own guitars. The only reason I don't use that on my own guitars, in fact it's so much easier using this, I can tell you, it cuts quicker, it's more precise. When you're cutting a 13 or a 10 slot, you've got so much, with different materials, you have so much potential for things being stuck and getting in the way, and plastic closing up at the bottom of the slot to give you false readings when you're down at tiny measurements that you don't get with this. This cleans it out, right out of the way for you. So there's a whole set of reasons why that's a good option. But I don't do it on customers' guitars because the weight of public perception, oddly enough, is so great. I don't want to create problems for myself. And I happen to have a set that I can use and get the job done. But don't think you have to have them, that's what I'm saying. Okay, so I want to cut this one down, and I'm going to start with my D string, and I'm just going to see, I put a 10 in here, and the slot is wider than a 10, so this is made, the slots in here are made for probably up to a set of 13s, and yet they'll play with 9s, which is probably a 9 set here. I'm cutting for a 10 to accommodate a 9. You see, there's a lot of leeway. The thing you really have to be watching out for when you do this is just your technique and the depth you cut. That's all you're really watching out for. Your technique is you want to be cutting slightly backwards at an angle. I go for about 5 degrees. It could be more extreme, it doesn't matter. What matters is that it's more than flat. So if you need to go a little higher to guarantee that it's definitely not flat, go anywhere between the level on the neck and the angle the string goes off. I don't make it the same angle. I make it sort of halfway in between, and it's just by eye. It's about 5 degrees or something like that, or maybe closer to 10. Anyway, you do a little bit at that angle, and you just check if your string still plays with the feeler gauge. Again, check which feeler gauge it is, make sure you've got the right one. If it still plays, you can cut a little bit more. And we're talking microscopic amounts now. And again, back at that angle, cut a little bit more. Stop. Clear it slot. Try it again. Hear it zizzing, we're on. Dead on the money. And I can see, visually, you won't be able to see it, but I can look at it from this side and I can see now a clear difference between that height and the height of the next string. So there's quite a bit to go on these other strings to bring them all to that level. And like I said, we are working with very small measurements, and what you've got to get your head around is that such small measurements can make such a profound difference in the way the guitar plays, feels and plays. Okay, so I can see an air gap between these, and it plays, so I've still got some way to go on here. Just move it off to one side again. Make sure I got the right thing, right gauge, right file, and just do a little bit of a cut. How much? Purely by experience and feel. And to do it, you've also got to remember that these files cut differently depending on which files you're using and which slots you're in. So if you start off by doing the bass ones like I'm doing, you kind of by the time you've done 3 you can be being quite forceful and aggressive to get to where you want to get to. But if you then translate that into one of the thinner ones, you run the risk of overcutting very quickly, because they can cut very differently. I'm almost on the mark. I'm partially judging by look, or by eye, and I'm going to stop there. That's pretty good. I want to keep everything as close to a tune as possible while I'm doing this, apart from possibly the one that I'm cutting. But even there, you only slack it off as little as you need to be able to move it out of its slot. It's better that it's tight and sitting in the slot, because you get a better reading that way. Now, this one is already pre-cut lower than the others, so I'm going to I would suggest this is probably about 0.2 that somebody's cut this to in the past. It's not too low, we can make it work. Yeah, 0.2 or 0.25. It's fractionally lower than the others, but hardly so much that you would notice. So I'm going to leave it as it is. Not cut any more, right? I'll go back to my 0.3. If there was a feel difference, I might take the whole lot down to 0.25. We have the leeway to do it. So I'm now taking off the top 3, or taking the top 2 off, measuring the G. You can see the gap there, it's quite a bit. Just enough to slack off and move it. I'm going to start with my 17 here, and then again assume the angle and get cutting. Again, this slot is considerably wider than the gauge I'm using. We'll obviously we'll end up cutting a narrower gauge into the bottom of this slot by doing this, but that's fine. The string will sit down into that, no problem. This is very critical. You've got to be slower, or caution at this point. Better multiple passes and get there slowly than to overcut, because overcutting means you have to then fix the overcut, which means you have to fill the nut with some cement of some sort, which is quite easy to do. I'm going to stop there. It's quite easy to do, but it's a little, probably, I don't know. Some people would say it's not a permanent repair. I use bone and super glue, which kind of makes it almost as hard, if not as durable, as the material it's sitting in. So I would partly dispute that. I think just perceptually, I think we'd probably like to know that it's not way off, or knackered and filled with a sort of filler substance to put it right. But again, that's only our knowledge. It plays perfectly well. And I would challenge anybody to demonstrate or detect any lack of sustain or tonality or whatever. It's just it's purism at work. So this little operation here, extended slightly by me blathering on about it as always, but you can see that it's not rocket science. Some people have come on to criticise or tell me it's wrong, and that you don't just choose these numbers. Well, no, I don't. They're from 150 setups experience. I go for what I go for, and it's born out of experience. These settings that I appear to have chosen arbitrarily, like 1.5 action at the last fret, a certain amount of relief, and a certain action over the first fret, those things are a result of having done it lots of times, and I can tell you that on an average guitar that I know my customers enjoy playing, it's a good combination of settings. Now I know other things too, like when I fret level next, it will reduce the action slightly, so it will become more than 0.3. I know, and people go on about this all the time, I know that if I put the guitar there, it'll slightly increase, because here it's flattened down slightly, even with the neck supported halfway. There's a tiny bit of gravity on the end here, flattening it down. So I know that when it's on its back, I can do all this work, but I know that the gap on the first fret will increase slightly, as will the action, the relief and the playing action. But it's fractional. You can test it yourself, as I've done many times. I don't care about the numbers, I just know what works in terms of making it play. So you'll always get people telling you that what you're doing is wrong, because perhaps, let's say they arrive at their conclusions by some sequence of decision making or some formula or whatever, and they make the mistake of thinking that equals chapter and verse, and therefore it is only the way it can be done. And if you just take the logical approach to this, there are a limited number of options here. There is a height over the first fret, there is the curvature in the neck, there is the action over the last fret dictated by the height of the bridge. There you could have a twisted neck, that will change things. You could have a neck that's slightly flared on one side, that will change things. But apart from those basic things, there is nothing else. And if you choose what you want for those, your playing action becomes a composite equation of those three things. Mainly those three things. Of course, other things factor in. Thicker strings, more tension, more thing, then you need to counter it with a truss rod. There are lots of variables, but the principle is you can choose that I'm doing a playing action that you want over here, a playing action you want over here, with reason, good credible reasons in my experience, and then a certain amount of relief in the neck once you've done that, that makes the strings to rotate freely enough without causing any fretting problems. And once you've got those things, then you can go and level the frets or tidy up the frets to make sure that the guitar plays in that configuration. And you'll see me do this. You'll see notes that are choking right now, like that. Actually, some of them are choking, and some of them are. This is actually can be quite an interesting thing. Some of them are choking on the frets. Some of them are causing these screws down here to vibrate, and it's hard to. I can't do it. I haven't got enough hands, but it can be very hard. No, that's the frets. Quite often, the buzzing of the screws in the tunematic bridge can simulate fret buzz quite nicely. And in fact, I had a customer not long back kind of rang up in horror about his guitar because he was convinced it had fret buzz, and of course I was able to show him that in fact it was all the little doofers, screws down in the bridge rattling, and there's nothing you can really do about that. That goes with the turf, the terrain of a tunematic bridge. What I will do, and I decided from that point onwards to avoid getting into that. Ooh, just on. In fact, just over, but that'll do. Yeah, to avoid getting into any problems, I'm going to fit little rubber fillers into there, and I'm going to do it on all guitars. And I bought, here's my little tip if you're interested, a bunch of these ancient vintage kind of pickup springs. These are used to position pickups instead of a metal spring, and I can get probably a tunematic bridge worth of, I don't know what you call them, buffers, dampers. I can get a whole bridge worth out of one of these. So you can see I've got, for a tiny amount, relatively small, $12 or something from the US, I've got myself a couple of hundred guitars worth of tunematic bridge rattle dampeners. Sorry, it sounds a big mouthful, but very useful to do because it takes away a nice little touch, and it takes away that really annoying rattle that you get with the stupid design of the tunematic bridge. I'm with old Scott Grove on that. I think they're a bit of a mad design really, but hey. Okay, so we're nearly there. Yeah, we're almost there, tiny fraction more. Small amounts. I'm going to stop there, it's close enough for my likings. Okay, so not that complex, not that difficult to do. Could have been done with this if we'd wanted to, but now I have an action on this guitar, forget the tuning, which is featherlight. And now I'll double check the neck relief to see what's happened in the time since we adjusted it, and I think it will be fine. Yep, that's good. I'm not going to do any more to that. So now I'm ready for the exciting, fun, scary bit of fret leveling, and preparatory to that I'm going to draw some marker pen on all my frets. And while I do this, I'll sort of explain a bit about the fret leveling process generally. And for those of you who've watched many of my videos, I do apologise. I kind of, because I make the video, I suppose primarily for the person who bought the guitar, you will hear me repeating myself endlessly, and I guess over time you'll hear me change my point of view on certain things, which is healthy, I would reckon. But yeah, I do apologise if it's just like endlessly repetitive, but just try to remember that these are aimed at the people who are either buying or considering buying the guitar. So coming back to the beginning, why am I concerned about levelling the frets at all? Why wouldn't I just whip the strings off now, clean the guitar up, maybe polish the frets with a, one of those fret blocks or whatever, fret rubbers, and then just put it all back together? Would it play? Probably, but you'd get those slightly choked notes that I pointed out before, and you'd get those because for the action I've chosen, the underlying frets are uneven enough to cause choking problems, because the choking happens when the frets are uneven enough so that a fret further down the line of the one you're pressing gets in the way of the fretted note. And that only happens because the distances or the quantities or measurements we're talking about are minuscule, and it's all too easy for a fractionally raised fret, for example, to choke off the note you're trying to play. We are talking about hundredths, if not thousandths of an inch or tenths of a millimetre type of clearances between the string you're playing and the next fret. Really, really are small values, and that's why at a low action those values or those clearances suddenly matter a great deal. When you've got a high playing action, they don't matter, because the underlying problems with the frets are kind of hidden from view, that you don't notice them because the strings are high enough that they never come in, they never make themselves known. It's only when you get lower, and that's what restricts most people from lowering the actions on the guitar to where they want them. So like I said a minute ago, what we're all about here is telling the guitar what we want it to do rather than the underlying frets telling us what's possible. So we've set the action we want, and now this part of the process is about making the frets conform to the action, and that just means ironing out any of that microscopic or fractional, tiny fractions of unevenness that are going to, as we heard, are getting in the way wherever they are. There, that kind of thing. That's happening because a fret, the next fret further down, is fractionally too high, and it means the fretted string is contacting the top of that fret. How do we take care of it? We level these things out relative to each other. We make sure they're all perfectly level, and then the mathematics of the triangle, if you like, described by the anchor point here, the anchor point there, and the fretting point. There's it's a quad. What is the thing? Four-sided thing, polygon. Anyway, the geometry of that ensures that once the frets are perfectly level, or if they're absolutely level, then you can fret these notes with a very low action down here and you get the ring out, and that's what we're aiming for. So how do you level frets? Simplest way would be to get to make sure that the neck was level, and then get a flat beam or a fret leveling file and scrape your way down. As long as the file's flat, which this is a Crimson Guitars, very effective file, very hungry, it takes off metal. But if we had the neck perfectly level, this perfectly level tool would just, and because of the way it crosses a number of frets, it would make sure that they were all level relative to each other. And that's the way I did it for the first few months or first year of doing guitars, is I made sure that the neck was level using the truss rod. It had no strings on it. Take the strings off, and under passive conditions level the neck as good as you can, then level the frets relative to each other with a dead flat surface. And it could be a fret leveling file like that, or it could be something else I can't reach, a sanding beam like this, which is just you can make your own, but this is what I've done. It's a sort of machine precise spirit level. Put some sandpaper on the bottom and you could very effectively level that. But again, this is all requires the neck to be flat. And that's all very well, and that promise you that will make your guitar play 80% better if you start with that process. But there is an additional benefit to be had if you can do it with a guitar in the fully strung position. But wait, says the smart people amongst you, if it's fully strung, remember we've got some curvature in the neck. How do you level frets when there's underlying curvature? You just can't do it, and you're absolutely right, you can't do it. But what if the what if the file was shaped like that? And what if the file itself matched the curve of the neck? Then you'd be filing relative level, but inside a curve. And that's what we do. To get this extra bit of precision, why is it more precise? Because it's more precise because you're doing it closer to reality. And what is the reality that you're simulating? It's the compression of the neck, not just the curvature, but the compression under load from the strings, and that makes the wood push the frets into microscopically different positions. It sounds ridiculous, but it's true. I found it does work. So how do I do it? Well, you can do it with a truss rod. You can do it with a number of kinds of truss rods. Here's what a truss rod looks like when you pull it out of your Squire Affinity Strat, for example. And when you take off the black plastic, what you've got underneath is a rod and welded to a bar underneath. And the rod, well, actually it's welded at one end to the rod, and it's welded at the other end to a bit that's screwable in. So you can effectively, by turning an Allen key in here, you can reduce the length of the rod, but it doesn't reduce the length of the bar. So what happens is the bar then bends, because it can't go anywhere, it has to bend, and that's what a truss rod basically is. And this allows you to bend. Oh, and it's got some sandpaper on the bottom, a self-adhesive. So suddenly I've got a fret leveling file, which with some cranking I can bend into a shape, and I can bend it to match exactly the shape or the relief in this neck. Cool. Now this one works really well. It's nice and thin, so it allows me to kind of level all the frets in nice thin strips across the radius. That's really good. But it's a little bit flexible for my liking, meaning that I can deform it slightly by pressing down here when I'm using it. So I wanted to try out a stiffer version, and this is one I bought from StewMac. It's a bit shorter. I should have bought the bass guitar. This is actually a truss rod for use in an electric guitar, which would be inside the body. But actually, for the job I'm doing here, I would have been better off with a bass guitar truss rod, which would have sat across all these frets. As it is, I'm missing a few and I have to kind of wander around a bit. But the benefit of this one is that it's encased in a kind of U shape of aluminium or aluminum, and therefore once I dial the shape into it, it's much stiffer. It's also stiffer to set up in the first place, but it keeps its curve stiffer. On the downside, it does sort of 2 string slots at once, but actually if you compare it to that, it's again half the size of that. So this pretty well works. I've done it in many guitars. So this is kind of halfway between that file and that file. Gives you this. So what I'm going to do is show you the miracle of how do you get this thing to match the curve, and it's a piece of simple physics and it's dead easy to replicate, and I'll show you. You get 3 things that are the same height and that stand above the strings. What do I mean? Well, I've got little brass dome nuts. You could buy your own, experiment. I can't remember what M number these are, but I want to spread them across equidistant to get the full width of this. To, if you like, imagine these as sample points, sample the full length of the neck. Okay, so then I put my beam across the top, sanding side down, and the job now is to deform this until it matches the curve of the neck. Now what's great about this is you only need these 3 points to measure, to map the curve, because it happens continuously between these points. But if the beam runs across and touches only these points, you know that the curve of the neck is making this sink lower than the bottom of the beam, so the beam is too straight. So you plunk this down, and right now I can feel by the way it contacts and by the fact that it doesn't move the middle one when I scrape side to side, I can feel that this curve, this is flat whilst this is actually curved. And it's so accurate that all I have to do now is to crank a bit of a curve into this one and try it again. Now it's touching the middle one, but it still feels like it's hitting a bit heavier on this end. And again, this becomes a bit of a feel thing. Ooh, that's not helpful. A bit of a feel thing. You'll get to know when it's touching the all three simultaneously. I always start with this end as the anchor end, so it's about when does it touch these two simultaneously. So I'm going to just tiniest little bit more curve into it, and I'm moving it, and it's moving the middle one as well, and it feels pretty much on the mark there. So what I've done is I've mapped I've made this truss rod match the curvature of this part of the neck. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take as little pressure off as possible, because I want to keep the tension in the neck. I'm going to move these first two off to one side, and I'm going to use a spreader, which is just a funny plastic electrical connector block. Just pushing it between the strings gives me access to this path. I've got 400 grit sandpaper on here, and here's what I do. I trust gravity, and I just place this truss rod down on here, and I let it work away, and I just move it a bit backwards and forwards because I've got to cover the frets it can't quite reach on its own, and then I stop and I look at what I'm getting here, and it's a really good diagnostic to stop at this point. And I'm getting cuts here, it's cutting the metal here, nothing along here, cutting here, cutting here, cutting here, and a bit here. So there's that high fret that's causing us problems, and you can see it's starting to cut already. I'm slightly concerned it's not cutting any in here, which could be an indication that we're not quite curved enough. So I'm just going to reposition these and just test one more time to try and ensure that we've got the right curve. And it's just a safety check, really, a double check. Okay, let's get this equally spaced, as good as we can. Right, that's as good as we'll get lengthwise. I'm just going to go a little bit more and see. Now I'll know straight away if I've gone too far. It'll plonk it down. That's no, it's fractionally too far. So it starts to skid over the top of this one at the end, and it tells me we're contacting the middle one first more than the end one, and that tells me I've gone too far. That feels right. Okay, so I'm now going to carry on. It's a really good reality check. You can't go wrong if you check again and again. So I'm just going back to here, and I'm just going to let this run over. Pretty much gravity alone at this point. I'm not putting any significant downward force on it. I just want the weight of the thing just to do what it has to do. Now the great thing about this is, although I can tell by looking at the frets which are getting cut and which aren't, the objective here isn't to get all of them cut. I mean, if you did that, the logical people amongst you would know that would mean that everything was probably level. But we only need to do as much as is necessary to make the guitar play with the configuration that we've got. So we don't want to just keep going so that we can abstractly say, hey, we've got everything absolutely level. We only want it as level as is required to make it play the way we want it to play. Why would we hold off? Well, because these frets have had half of their life gone already, and I don't want to take any more metal than I need to make this play as good as it can play. If I wanted to kind of go any further, I'd have to refret it, or I'd be running the risk of refretting. So I put the strings back in for now, take the spacer out. Up to tune. With strings this old, it's every likelihood at this point that they'll break. You have to be aware of that, and you might need a couple of spare strings knocking about from old guitars to put into place if it does. But at this point, remember, we had I can tell you where it is. Up here we had a choke, Still a little bit. It's now playing where it wasn't before. So it's all playing. We've got rid of that first choke, but there's a tiny bit more to do, I think. So I'm just going to again lay the strings off sideways. If I can do it without slackening them, even better. And then put the spacer in at the bottom here, just give me access. And I'll do a little bit more. One of the other benefits of fret leveling is not only to improve the playability, so you can get the action you want, but it's also part of taking away the grooves that a well-played guitar will build up. So it's a kind of is it a byproduct? It's a kind of, in this case, it's a byproduct of fret leveling for ease of action, but it's a nice byproduct, and sometimes it becomes the overall focus of it. Sometimes you might not be interested in fret leveling, it might be perfect, but you still have huge wear dents at this end, and you'd still need to do the fret leveling process if you wanted to remove those dents. On this guitar they're relatively mild, which is great. It means we don't have to take away loads of material to improve the way they look at this end of the guitar. But again, you've got to be sort of conscious that if they are very deep, you may find yourself on a guitar like this with half fret life left. You may find that you can't remove them all just for cosmetic sake. You just may not have the option or the leeway to do it. So again, it's a judgment call, and what I'm doing here is I'm sticking to my principle of stopping when I've got a playable set of notes, and if that clears these dents down this end, because they're minor, then fine. But I can see there's a couple that it hasn't, but I'm perfectly happy to polish those out or polish those as they are. I'd rather have a couple of very mild dents and loads of good fret life than to chase after perfectly dent-free frets at the expense of the overall life of the guitar before it needs refretting. So I'm not going to over focus, but again, it's down to where is your focus primarily, and my focus primarily is on the playability of the guitar more than it is on the cosmetics or the intellectual knowledge that these still have some very small dents in them. I can live with that. In fact, you can, as you know, you've probably played guitars that have quite significant dents down that end, and they still play. You don't have to get rid of those. I'm just treating it as a nice side benefit. Okay, so like I said, up to tune. As close as you can get, and then the proof being in the pudding of trying it out. You really try everything. Perfect. Perfect. So if you could be bothered to, I don't recommend it, but if you wanted to, you could go back to the first bit of the video where we tried that out, and you could go and hear just how much those notes were choked up there and how much buzz, overall buzz, and you can see now that that action has got rid of it. And at this playing action with low first fret action, with the amount of relief we've got, we now have adjusted these frets in the first couple of string tracks, if you like. We've adjusted them to meet the action that we want this guitar to have, and that's great. All we have to do now, and I won't bore you with it all now, you've seen the principle, I'm just going to do this off camera and put the radio on, but all we have to do now is just repeat this process across the rest of the radius, doing it 2 strings at a time, and I'm going to reset excuse me, I'm going to reset every time I do it. Am I going to do that? What am I going to do? Let's get my head around it. Yes, I'm going to do it 3 times. So I'm going to replace my brass buttons here. I'm going to make sure they're equidistant, or as close as can be done, which is just about here. If I go there, let's see what happens. Yeah, just about. So I'm going to remeasure and adjust the truss rod. I'm going to do the middle track, and then once that's done, I'll test by playing, and then I'm going to come to the bass track and do the same thing, reset it each time, just to make sure. It may be that I don't have to readjust this curvature, but very often you do, and you just let the science of the science of the domed nuts lead you, right? Okay, so I'm going to see you in a minute when it's all done. Thanks for sticking with it this long. I hope it was useful to understand why I do what I do, and actually how easily you could do the same. That's the whole point of this. Okay, just a quick update on this. Oh, are we on? Yeah, we're on. I've taken loads of stuff off so I can get a good run at cleaning all of it, which is a nice thing. You can see that, just for your information, the construction of these things is the scratch plate is just a scratch plate, doesn't cover anything up. We've got one of these pots is already loose, and that's causing a slight intermittent problem on the back, and I can see here that it's almost the earth on this is almost hanging off, so I'm going to resolder that. And that's often the case when you have if you've got intermittent or any electrical problems, it's often you can trace it to a pot that's started to move over the years, because as soon as they start spinning under operation, then what you get is you get the cables, the wires at the back starting to break, because these electric wires basically just don't want to move. They don't want to be moving at all, and the construction of these things isn't the greatest for making sure that nothing moves. There's no, I don't know what you call it, but there's not a lot of locking. What's the word I'm looking for? The things that make them lock in place. Washers. Those kind of locking washers. You really want something to keep this under tension, so that it can't possibly move and cause problems with the wiring. See this one. This one's not even on properly. I don't know why is that. That's because it's got a nut on this side which doesn't allow it to go through fully. So we could do with a washer maybe, but if we take that off, we get come through much further, and we can get a much better purchase on the nut to do it up. And I'd rather have that than having it sort of standing, what's the word, proud now, standing out on the other side. I've just got to make sure it's in the right position, which is pointing sort of inwards, and hold it in position by hand and tighten it up. And it is all about making sure it will just stay in place. Okay, so the two of these are fully through, this one and that one. I'm going to double check the in fact what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the nut out of each of these from the inside position, because they're not allowing them to go through far enough, and it's not necessary. It's just making it harder to keep them in place. Sorry, you can't see very well. But yeah, so I already knew in advance that there was a bit of an electrical problem with this, and I think it's pretty easily traced down to the actually, you know what I'm going to do? Just bear with me a second while I do this. I'm going to get some washers out, just to, I don't want too much stress on these, on the wood. Often you can get too much stress on the wood. Washers, come on, where's the word? Washers. I've got loads of washers in my OCD box, as I call it. And the reason I call it OCD is maybe it's just a man box, but no offence there. Don't quite know what else you call something that you just really enjoy putting things away in. It's a very childlike pleasure, or maybe it's a very male brain thing going on there. But yeah, really look forward to putting away stuff in that box. Sad. Okay, so I haven't got four exactly the same size, but we're close enough. That one's a bit. Yeah, we'll try that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to. That was the other way around, wasn't I? Yep. Drop that off, and I'm going to put a washer on here before I do it up. It's a very thin washer, but it's hopefully going to spread the load from this nut that goes on here. So I've got more room to put the nut on than I had before, which gives me a better purchase, as they say. If I can get it back on. More room to put the nut on, but I've got a washer that's going to spread the load once it contacts with the wood, and it's playing up now. It's not going to go on. Now it will. Use my adjustable spanner. Now, having handled this all quite a bit, I'm going to get back in there and double check everything afterwards, make sure it's all through. I know which ones I think are already unattached, but I'm just going to do the same pretty much for everything. Take off the inner nut and put an outer washer on, just to help spread the load. And that should mean that the pots, the knobs sit a little bit higher off the deck than they were currently sitting. It wasn't on this guitar, but quite often you can end up with the knobs scratching the paintwork as they go around, because they can be too low to the surface. Okay, a couple more. I mean, this will reveal what, if anything, is loose. You'll feel it pretty quickly when you take these things off. So washer on there. I'm also going to give all of this a good shot of contact cleaner as well, including into the switch. Dust, first of all, a blast of air to get rid of any dust, and then contact cleaner. We might as well, we want it to run trouble free for as long as possible. Right, get the thing off there. I think they do the wiring on this more complicatedly than I would. I'm not quite sure what the difference would be. But there we are. Come on, fit back on. Really. So I just want them pointing in the direction where I can get access to the lugs for any necessary soldering. Hold it in place, do it up. Okay, so those are nicely done up. We've gained ourselves a few unnecessary nuts. And like I say, I can see the earth definitely needs soldering on this one. So I'm going to fire up the soldering iron, wherever it's gone, and get that done before I do anything else, because I'd like to then put the cover back on before I do anything else. If I can just, sorry about this, make some space. So taking all the bits off like this gives me a good opportunity to clean this up, and you know, if any of this needs a little bit of touch up with paint, then I can do that. I think one of the things that really makes the difference is you can get into the headstock to clean it up so it looks really nice and as new as it can do. Also, I'm going to clean the fingerboard, and then you can polish around here as well to just kind of get into places that you never could normally get while the knobs and attachments are still off. But I get this bit done first. Although now seem to have lost my sponge, my bit of sponge. Oh dear, that's annoying. Can live without it, but I'd rather not. I think I'll cut another piece from the sponge I've got down here. Pardon me, I'll disappear from radar for a few seconds while I get myself a new square of sponge. These tin snips are fantastic for all manner of easy jobs. Ta-da! There you go. Oh look, couldn't have done it better if I'd measured it. Okay, so we'll let that catch up with us. Get some solder, and we're ready to go. We've got the pliers over here to press things down with. So this is, there you go, it's practically snapped off. So that's just an earth connection that I need to strip back a little bit. I seem to have lost all my blades. My usable blades have vanished. Oh no, there's one. I'll probably just use that. Yeah, so just strip this back a tiny little bit and get a little bit of bare wire. Personally, I much prefer to use my fingers. Maybe it's I've never bought a good enough wire stripper, but I always prefer to do it by hand. So I'm going to give this a little bit of pinning before I attempt to put it on. And what I'm going to do is just rather than, there's no reason not to, I'm going to just prepare a fresh bit of solder on this pot rather than try and put it on top of what's already there. So scratching up the pot with some rough sandpaper is a very good way to prepare it to receive a new blob of solder. And make sure this is nice and clean. Looking good. So, sorry, terrible view, I'm a hopeless cameraman. So yeah, just tinning this wire before we try and attach it to the roof of the pot as a new earth connection. Wipe off the excess if we can. Don't want to go. Come on. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to prepare the space, or a new blob of solder on top of the pot to remake that earth connection, and always on the lookout to make sure that I'm doing this, the soldering iron isn't going anywhere else, leaning against anything. So sometimes it just won't do what you want. It's not making the casing hot enough just yet. There we go. Blowing a load of solder on there. Clean off again. Right, then I want to get in there with my pliers to press this down into the solder. Everything else looks good. I don't see any other areas that look even vaguely like they've come off. So I'm just basically going to hold this thing in place with the pliers and then just get that solder to soften up whilst avoiding melting any other wires. There you go, it's on and it spreads out, dries, and sticks. Okay, so that's that earth remade. Everything else is working. I'm going to replace the lid, put it on the lowest torque when I put this back on, just so I can refix the screws. These come in and out quite a few times, so they're not really biting very well. It's enough to hold the thing in place, but okay. So that's all I'm going to do in the soldering department. I think that will have... Oh, you know what? Make a monkey out of me. I forgot to do the spray. Only a moment's work, but hey. Right, so I will find where the spray went. It's a good question. Where did the spray went? Fresh air. Ah, here it is. Covered in sawdust. Cheers, man. Right, that's a bit of fresh air sprayed in there, and then I will find where my electric cleaner goo went. Once that's all dried off, a bit of solvent comes out with that. Everything else is nice and connected. Can't really get into these pots very well, but you can give it a go. Right. So that's my little nod to trying to get it to play without any crackles. It's very effective having the air. I recommend you getting it. It can be all it takes to clean up the crackles in a pot. I find that on the Strats it tends to be a bit easier to get into the switch. And you can't get under there to the knobs. There's no access at all. Right, so that's, I didn't mean to come back for a full-on thing here, but while I'm here, the next bit of the game will be to take a rag. Whoa, take a rag. It doesn't have to be the cleanest in the world, but I'm just going to use this. It's not polishing really. I'm just going to get some napalm, I was going to call it, naphtha, onto here, and I just want to take off the immediate sort of surface grunge and see what comes off and what's left behind. You can get quite a nice, usually get rid of a lot of the mess actually to begin with, so it's a lot better for a quick once over like this. This is wet. Is that naphtha it's wet with? I think so. And again, if you're going to polish with the knobs off. What was that? Polish with the knobs off, and then you can, when you put them back on, you'll have sort of cleaned underneath them. Again, this is really just a once over to get rid of. This feels very wet. I don't know if I put that much naphtha on there. Maybe I did. Yeah, this just gets rid of the surface stuff really. And then to finish off, I would go over this with a scratch remover polish, a sort of once over, but it's a nice thing just to get rid of the main gunge to begin with. See what you're working with. And also kind of important to do a heavier job on the fingerboard. If I was refretting this, I would be able to just clean up the fingerboard by re-radiusing it. Giving it a complete, taking off the top layer with sandpaper to the exact radius. But since I'm not, I have to sort of go in there and get in there manually to remove some of the goo. Now this is going to take a lot of the stuff off the pen off the frets as well, which is fine. We're going to use more pen on the frets a bit later on when we come to reshape them. But it doesn't matter, we'll if it cleans it off now, it's absolutely fine. So I'm just using the naphtha to clean up finger grease. It won't all come off in one go, probably. So it's worth giving it a couple of runs over. And if it's really sticky, you can get a toothbrush up into the sort of bit where it meets the frets. But I'm not a great fan of getting the naphtha into the fret slots, if possible, avoiding that. We don't want to weaken the fret grip in any way. But this is just a sort of hygiene bit, really. Gets rid of the last build-up of goo from fingers, makes it look and feel cleaner, so that you can put your own goo on it. of a workout that. Right, so that's the first run. Using the naphtha on it like that will dry it out a little bit, so we do need to re-oil it by the time, or when we come to put it all together again. Right, so having done that, I've now sort of brought us back to the present moment, which, what's the present moment going to involve? Putting away these things to begin with. So I must keep order in my world. I know it looks like a total mess over there, but you can ignore that. That's yet to be tidied up. But meanwhile, I'm going to put these over here. Right. One of the things that I've got to do on this guitar is where I took that little plate off. The screws that was holding that down are really knackered, so I'm going to need to replace those. I probably don't have black ones to replace it with, but that's not the end of the world. Okay, so what are we doing in the next stage of the game? Well, realistically, the next stage of the game involves what I haven't done is cleaned up the individual components, which I will do off camera. But the next stage of here, to get the neck done, is to, having levelled the frets, we need to now reshape them so that they're not flattened on top, but they're nice curved shape, which is what the guitar likes. And to do that, we're going to use a particular tool, a fret reprofiling tool or a fret crowning tool. And after that, then we're going to sand out with lots of different grades of paper to get get it back to where we want. Somebody's definitely worn down the nut here. So realistically, a little boring thing that has to happen at this point in time, but it's quite meditative, is that we need now to get the neck covered up, or the fingerboard, sorry, covered up. And then it's going to require cutting strips of different width. Now obviously, to begin with, we can use full width strips, and I make it quite a bit longer so I can tack it around the back, pinch it around the back, and that makes it easier to remove when we come to it at the end. But this is really important to get this done thoroughly, and don't skimp on it. And I'm going to, off camera, I'll cut a load of strips of different widths and put them on right the way up to the higher frets, so that everything is perfectly covered, and a bit of the body up here and the pickups, so they don't pick up any dust or stuff while we're doing this. The sanding is a process that picks up most dust, or kicks up most dust. So I'll come back in a minute when that's done, and we'll go into the next phase. I'll just put this off to one side while I cut the bits of paper ready, and see you in a minute. Oh, so I've painted the frets again in glorious marker pen, and the reason for that is I'm now going to use the medium size side of this fret reprofiling tool, or fret crowning tool, and the idea is it's just going to help round off the frets so that they are nice and, I suppose, arch shaped or humpbacked, or whatever you want to call it. But and they do that by just wearing away the shoulder of the flat spot until it's nice and smooth shape again, and it doesn't show up on the frets that haven't been touched, but on the ones that have, you have to work the edges inwards using this tool until you're left with a very fine line of marker pen down the centre of the fret, and that lets you know that you've reshaped it but haven't taken any more height off the fret, because of course we want them to be nice and rounded, but we don't want to lower the fret any more than it's been lowered, because we've already gone to some lengths to level it out. So if you haven't had to flatten out the frets too much, you don't really have to do all that much with this tool. Some guitars I end up doing a lot more work with it than others, but this one is proceeding quite nicely. Okay, so I'm going to get off and listen to the radio again, just so you know what's going on, and come back once I've polished these frets, and I'm going to do the polishing by going through a series of sandpapers from 600 to 12 to 1500, then a series of micromesh papers, and finally with some auto sol at the last, maybe with a Dremel run over the top. But we'll end up with really smooth threads. But I'll come back at the end of that process because it's noisy and dirty, and I've shown it a million times before on other videos, so I'll see you in a minute. By a miracle, we're back, and you can see that the bits are going back on the guitar. I've cleaned all the components and we're ready to replace everything, including on-go the knobs. Trying to line them all up with the same 0 start point. And now next thing is to get the strings on, and I've cleaned all the hardware as well, so it's all just ready to go. Tuners are back on, cleaned as well, so it really is last ditch. I've painted in a few of the scratches. I've just given them a very light coating of black paint, just so they don't stand out so much. I'm not trying to do any more clever finishing than that. So this is always a nice bit. This is where it pays off. What's great about this part and doing it this way round is that there are no surprises now. What I know is that once I string this and tighten the load on the neck, it's going to go back into the position it was when we finished fret leveling, which means the fact that it played then means it's going to play now. The only thing that might be slightly different is the height of the action, but all I have to do is just to dial in the 1.3-ish millimeters that we had at the beginning, for which we, with which we did the fret leveling, and it will play the same. So that's looking good. I'm just going to put the strings off to one side, get the first one through. My my stringing practice. Right, I've got things jammed up here. Come on. My technique for stringing is fairly straightforward. I go through the head of the peg in a straight line, sit it onto its bits down here on the bridge, and then on here, and then I pull back about a whole fret's worth, and then I hold on to it and start tightening, making sure this string, the held string, is uppermost and the loose string goes underneath on this way round. And then as it comes round again, I just up that, and then keeping it all under pressure, I make sure that the held string this time goes under the loose string as I tighten up, and that gives it a sort of an extra locking thing going on. And then I can just cut the excess right off there and go on to the next one, making sure that they're through the back of the stop piece properly. Actually, what I'll do first, before I go any further, I'm just going to put the truss rod cover back on. Just makes it a little bit easier than doing it when it's all strung up, which is much harder. Okay, there's the 3 screws, easy to lose. On very low torque, so the clutch on this will slip as soon as it hits any pressure, because I don't want to grind away the thread on this wood. And the final one. So we are almost ready to go. There we go. So just to repeat, it's hard to keep dust off a black finish. So through the peg, make sure it's all tightened up and straightened along the back. Pull it back a whole fret's worth. Tighten over first, and then under the free string the second time round. Okay. Cut off the excess. So dead simple. You don't want too much string wound onto the post, because it tends to act like a spring, and it will coil. Because it's a coil, it will contain quite a bit of stretch, and it invites the thing to go out of tune a bit too easily for my liking. So this is a limited amount, or a dependable, regular, or consistent amount of excess string getting wound on each time. Now we come over to the other side, and it just gets a little bit fiddly doing it this way around, because we're now doing it back to front. The same principle applies. Make sure it's in its correct grooves. Through, back, one length, one fret length, and this time we're winding it on. We want it to stay in place, we don't want it to jump off like that. Come on, stay in place. And this time we go over the top first time, which is good. Flip it up, keep it under tension. Again, you get used to doing this. And then under the second time. Ah! You get your finger caught in there like I just did. And it hurts. Again, off with the excess. Nothing nicer than coming to this stage, getting the getting the strings, final two strings on. Then we've got a stretching process, get all the slack out of the strings. Once we've done that, then we can get ready to do the intonation, and the intonation followed by a bit of a playing through if I get the chance later on. About an hour or so playing it for fun, and then we kind of get a sense of how well it plays and if it needs any final last minute adjustments. It's good. Well, we can get this off to its new owner sooner rather than later. Hopefully they can come over for it tomorrow, and it'll become property of a youngster who hopefully will have some real good fun with it. So this is a fiddly part. This you really have to do some contortions to get it done. But when you get used to it, you can do it fairly quickly. Okay, everything in place. I've got the little rubber inserts to do on the bridge to make sure that it doesn't rattle. Okay, so while we're here and the guitar's still on its back, what I'm going to just show you is the stretching of the strings, which is really important to do early before you start trying to play it or do any intonation adjustments. And it's just a matter of getting the strings and going up and down, and you end up putting greasy marks on the pickups. But just go up and down the whole string, stretching it, pushing with thumb and fingers, and when you do it like that you can get a fairly good feel for how much you can press it without breaking it. I think I've only broken one string so far doing this, but I've broken a lot more doing it with a plastic stretching tool, which you don't have any control over. You can't feel how much stretch you've done on it, and so consequently you end up breaking more, I think. Okay, so look, I've got the guitar here. I think that's in tune. Oop. first stretch, I'll give it a second stretch. I've replaced the two little screws here with slightly larger ones, but they're much better condition on the end so that we can get them out again if they ever need to. Right, the way they were before, they were never going to come out. Not that they have to, there's no real reason, but I just hate leaving knackered screws in things when they need changing. So what, if you've tuned it first time, this stretch will give you an indication of how much out of tune it's gone. Let me use the tuner on here. Okay, so there we have it. First touch. That plays all the way up, and I haven't even checked the actual action up here yet. So next thing to do is to go, whoa, okie dokie, that's very low. That's 1.5, oh that's good. And that's about 1.5, so that's pretty good. That's where I like it. Feels superb. Right, I'm going to stop there for a minute. Just hang it up. There you can see it. Looking nice. Having done that, leave it to sit for a bit. I'm going to do the intonation, which is to get the individual string length, each individual string to the correct length for the neck, because they all have to be slightly different. They're all set slightly different already on here, but I'll just check to make sure it's in the right place. Then it will be playing it to make sure the grounding fault has been cured, and then that will be it pretty much. Oh, and fill in some rubber into these gaps here so that it doesn't buzz at any point, and then we are pretty much all done. Okay, so I'll hold up for a minute. Okay, so we're ready to do the intonation. Convinced about this bottom bridge pickup here. I wonder if it's got the right capacitor on it. I shall have a look in a minute, go in the back afterwards, but for the time being I'm going to just do the intonation. I'm just trying to get all the last bits of stretch out of these strings. So the game here is to get the right length for each individual string for this neck, and although there is a notional scale length for this guitar, sort of an average where the bridge sits, each string has to be a slightly different length, which is why the bridge saddles all sit in different positions. I'm picking up dust from somewhere. That is really weird. What have I... Anyway, so yes, so what I'm going to do is, the way we intonate this is we have a screwdriver ready for making adjustments to the bridge. This way we have to come from the front, which is going to be really difficult given the height that those pickups are set at, which is really annoying. So I'm going to wind them in for a minute. Let's wind them in and get them as flat as I can, so I don't really need them the second sticking up quite so high. There's a real output difference. I'm going to explore this, but anyway, meantime, let's go back and do the intonation. So we tune to the harmonic ping, and then fret on the 12th. So if it's sharp, what it means is it's too short. We need to push the bridge back a little bit. And the way we do that is by dialing this anti-clockwise and pushing it and making sure it sits back in place. Flat, which means we have to come the other way. It's a very microscopic adjustment. So I'm going to go clockwise. Very fiddly, I have to say. Or is it anti-clockwise? Sorry. Anti-clockwise to bring it back. No, it's clockwise. Get it right. They just don't respond very quickly. It's a lot of fiddle. Still a bit too long, so we'll bring it forward a bit more. Taking it sorry, I keep getting this wrong. By taking it clockwise, we'll bring it towards the nut a little bit. Same again, a bit more. To this, a bit more forward. I might go and change out for the other tuner because I'm not 100% happy with this one. Close. Well, according to that, the other one should be way forward. Let's see what happens. Be way forward. It's too long. The note is flat, therefore the string is too long. So we'll do everything we can to pull the string forward, but we may find ourselves running out of bridge space or intonation space. Looking good for the outcome of the whole thing. I will get my other tuner in a minute to recheck it. going to stop here. I'm going to go and get the other tuner, because if this is telling me, if this isn't accurate, sorry, if this is accurate, then it's going to mean taking this bridge off and turning these things round, give myself more intonation room, which I could do without, frankly. Yeah, I'm going to go and get that, so let me put it on hold and I'll be back to you in a minute. So, we are just coming towards the end. I've just taken the saddle off and intonated the strings using the extra bit of leeway, room that gives us to do that. But I've also detected a problem with the jack plug output socket here, which has caused some sort of wiring issue. So I'm going to take this jobby off a minute and check the wiring here, and be prepared to fix the wiring and put it back on. Okay, something is not right here. Let me just put this in. I don't know if that was, something was touching something. Oh, donk. Okay. I don't think that solder's done properly. Doesn't actually stick to. It's not bound to the side of the thing. It's not gone through. It's a dry joint. So yet again, I'm going to fire up the soldering iron. This will be the last tweak, and then we're done. I'll put this back on, and I'll put. I'm going to put the grippery thing on the other side, because these things need it, I think. Washers. There's been quite a bit of messing about to get this right. So somebody's done some quote-unquote work on here, which has really kiboshed it all a bit. But I finally got it sorted, and I'm gonna do a couple of things. I'm gonna get a special tool for tightening up the jack plug socket once it's in place. Then be just ready to give it a quick twang and take it indoors and get ready to tell the customers that it's ready, thankfully. So, along with doing a few other things today, particularly around the oak caster, which is hanging up here, letting the headstock lacquer cure once again, and I'm going to then sand that down probably tomorrow sometime and put it back together again. It's looking a lot better, and it's going to take to the sanding down a lot better. I've also put a little bit of true oil back on it. It looked a little bit dry once I'd taken it off, so I put a thin layer back on. Okay, so everything sort of looks okay, but I don't like these solders. The solder doesn't go all the way through these things. I don't know if that's some sort of clever stylistic thing that's supposed to be like this, but it doesn't really do it for me. So I'm going to lather on the solder thick enough to make sure there's a good join here. It's not like we have to go easy on it. We're not trying to save solder for anything. I want it to make a strong connection. Now doing this, it may well knock the whole thing out, but we may not have got up to speed yet. Not quite hot enough. Let it get up to speed. We're nearly there. But yeah, that'll be done then. It's been quite good to work out the problems. One of the problems is this had, well, arguably the wrong size capacitors, but I've left the original one. They're quite expensive, these ones I've replaced it with. I've replaced one of them on the treble one to give it a bit more treble. I think it will give it more treble anyway, but it's I've left the one on the the neck pickup on there because it sounds okay, but the bridge one to my liking wasn't trebly enough, and they're supposed to be, well, ideally for a Les Paul or an SG, I think it's supposed to be a 0.022 capacitor, and in fact what there was on there was 500s. Okay, now come on, let's really heat this joint up properly, come on. Thank you. Grip onto there a moment, would you, sir? Thank you very much. So nearly done. Thanks for your patience. This has made a slippery, bit of a slippery mess on here, and it's not melting properly. So I'm going to clear it off and do it again. I want this joint to be proper like. I wish I could find a soldering iron with a flexible cable. I tell you I do. Right, let's put this round this way. Get the iron on it from down here. Huge great blob of solder that I'm going to want to take away first of all. Better. Start again. Make sure it goes through and we get a good connection this time. Probably need my special glasses on. Not seeing too perfectly well right now. I think I'll do that. Get this bit right. Nice solid lake of solder. Nice connection. Again, I'm not thrilled with the way this other one's gone, so likewise I'm going to take the solder off that one and put it on again. Make my solder socket ready. Good. Okay, so I'm going to just replace that with my solder of my own choice. Yep, that's jumped forward, that's no good. Okay, that will hold it nicely as it dries. I'll separate it out. Okay, iron off. solder it out of the way. So what I'm going to do now is just poke that through. Okay, does it want to go through with that on there? I don't think it does. Oh well. Okay, it only just gets through. So I'll put it back the way it was, and it's at least cushioned by this, what do you call it? That thing. Washer. That's the word I'm looking for. Okay, so this is a great little tool. I can put this in here and turn it backwards, and it locks onto the inside of the thingy, and then I can use this adjustable spanner on the outside to do it up nice and tight. So I don't want to over tighten it, but equally I don't want it moving around anymore. And I just bring that back that way to loosen it off. Brings that, yeah, good connection, brings that, bizarrely brings that pickup back to life. It's amazing how some things appear to work for no, logically you would be very hard pushed to argue that a dry joint down at the jack plug socket would cause the bridge pickup not to play fully and to lose its treble, and I couldn't really explain to you why that would be, but you've just seen that's what it does. So it's, and I think a piece of learning I made. Wow, that's much better. Huge improvement. Okay, a piece of learning then is the things that move are the things that are at fault usually. So think about the things that move. Knobs, they turn. Switches, they go backwards and forwards. And most of all, this sucker here is going to go at some point. Well, we've got loads of power out of it now, which is great. That's more like it. Okay, happy with that. There you go. Bit of trial and error there to get there. Got there in the end. So that's it for now. Thanks. Pleasure to spend the time with you. I'm going to go back to some other bits and bobs, but that's pretty much it for this guitar. I've done everything. Oh, I've just got to put the thing on the back. But apart from that, we are done, and there concludeth another nice vintage SG. Another great example of, no matter how they look, when you get a second-hand guitar, you can be sure that somebody's taken a screwdriver to it and done something and changed out something, and it's always the way. So I can never really assume that it's going to be right. When I heard those pickups, first of all the way through doing that setup, afterwards when I was trying it out, I was thinking to myself, that's not right, there's not enough power coming out of these things. And you could see that the bridge pickup is still quite high up. I put it high up because it's nice to give it loads of power on a guitar like this, but it was right the way up there next to the strings, and it wasn't producing any power at all, and I just knew there was something wrong. So I had to think about it, and was able to change out one of the capacitors, which secured or helped the tone range a bit, but it was just by sort of waggling around a bit with the jack plug, I could tell there was something going wrong around there. So it's really nice to find the fault pretty quickly. But I think if you ever it can be really confusing. I'm not a great electrician by any means, and my piece of advice to you would be, if you find yourself with something that doesn't quite work and you just have no idea what it is, it can't hurt to go back to the things that move when it comes to electrics. That moves a hell of a lot, and these move, and it's that set of things that are going to move. And anything that moves, if these move away, if they twist all the way around, they're going to snap wires off. If you waggle this backwards and forwards, you're going to snap wires. The joint wasn't even made properly there. If this moves, this is probably the safest of the lot because it moves within a fixed thing, so it doesn't swivel around too much. But eventually it can spin round. You can see this is on its way around a bit. Yeah, go for the things that move first, and check the broken connections. And after that, if you can't see the obvious ones, like there was an obvious earth fault on here, then go for assume some dry joints in there, or dry solder joints. So in the time that I was doing that off camera, I also oiled the fingerboard, and I also put some graphite in the nut slots. So this guitar is ready to go. It's dark, so it picks up dust instantly, but it's not bad looking or beastie. So there you go. Vintage SG by Trev Wilkinson, set up by Reloved Guitars. See you again soon.